The Maple Leafs have their three-game win streak come to an end with a road loss in the Motor City. Welcome into Rinkwide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at Bodog.net. Rob Wong, joined alongside by David Alter, who comes to us from Little Caesars Arena in Detroit, where the Maple Leafs fell 4-1 to the Red Wings on the second night of a back-to-back, a sloppy start for the Maple Leafs in the first period, Dave, before finding their legs a bit in the second, and then the third period push. But overall, not their sharpest game tonight. Really weren't able to generate a ton offensively. They did have some opportunities, of course. Ville Husso standing strong in goal for Detroit. But maybe this is one of those scheduled losses that people like to point out from time to time with the way things are working right now. The Maple Leafs without Auston Matthews once again made some, intriguing roster decisions. We'll get into those with Jordy Ben and Wayne Simmons coming into the lineup. But what did you make of the game tonight in Detroit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I would have pegged it as a loss per se. I mean, they've actually, for the most part this season, have found a way to gut out wins or at least results on the tail end of back-to-back all season long. I think there was just a lot of discombobulation. This was the fifth game in 8 nights for the team. There was, maybe a bit of a feeling of fatigue. And you got that sense in that first period when I looked at just how many chances there were from the slot for the Red Wings early on. And really, they were just kind of trying to hammer things through. I thought this was a difficult position for someone like Ilya Samsonov to be in on the tail end of back-to-backs, but it was his turn to kind of do that after Matt Murray was the guy on that back-to-back before on the tail end. And I thought he did a pretty good job in that regard. But when you don't have Auston Matthews, the second game of back-to-backs, Detroit's kind of rested. And you sprinkle in some other guys into the lineup that haven't played in a little bit. Wayne Simmons did play recently, but Jordy Ben hasn't played in 2023 until this game and is playing with a defensive partner who is also just recently back from injury. So all that kind of set up for the result that they got. Some bad luck their way, which we'll talk about too in Bobby McMann's second NHL game. But coming out on the losing side of it, maybe not surprising, but the Leafs had established a good template of how to get points in these tail end of back-to-back games, and they just weren't able to get it done tonight.
No, they were not. But I do want to, point out one positive tonight. And I know the score sheet and maybe the stats didn't exactly look the way that the game went. But Ilya Samsonov with another strong performance, which is nice to see. He's now put together a couple of good starts here, and very much so. The night before against Nashville, Matt Murray really won the Maple Leafs that game, and it felt like it could potentially be the same way here if the Maple Leafs were, going to be able to make a comeback. Samsonov did everything that he could to keep his team in it, made 19 saves, which wasn't a lot, but there were a ton of big ones and a lot of big moments in order to keep the Maple Leafs in this game against Detroit. But let's hear from Mark Giordano, who says Samsonov definitely made sure that things did not get out of hand in this one.
He gave us a chance. I think he was great. He made a lot of saves from in the slot, which we got to clean up. We can't give up that many quality looks, but he looked really good all night. Really confident in there. So again, it just felt like we didn't have enough. We were playing from behind, and we didn't have enough looks like in tight and around the net.
So there's Mark Giordano with his thoughts on the overall play of the defense and the goaltending tonight, which he did not have a problem with. But, when it comes to Samsonov, as you mentioned, Dave, his turn in the rotation, if you will, pretty clear the Maple Leafs are trying to get Matt Murray ready for Saturday and that big game against the Boston Bruins. But, we talked about the last couple of games now. Matt Murray has clearly turned things around with some big performances, and Samsonov seems to be back on track. I think a little tonight, it was kind of frantic at times. I mean, the puck was kind of flying all over the place past him. But as Mark Giordano said, made some massive saves on some really grade A chances in the slot, which was nice to see. It felt like he was tracking the puck pretty well. I know he wasn't happy with that final goal on the power play by Sider, but he was screened. It was a tough one for him, but I thought, overall, he definitely...
Game's out of reach at that point, too.
Yeah. But overall, I mean, he was just really strong, and I thought he was tracking the puck pretty well and made some, really acrobatic saves at the end of it.
Yeah, acrobatic is exactly the word. You said frantic, and that kind of reminds me of, when we talked about goalies like Jack Campbell and especially Peter Mrazek last season. Frantic was definitely the word because there was just a lot of side to side movement. Tonight, I thought it was absolutely necessary. Look no further than that tic tac toe save he made late in the second period, where he manages to get his stick on it. Like any goaltender's dead in the water, and all you can really do is try to go side to side as fast as you possibly can. And at that point, when it is tic tac toe in close, you're really just kind of guessing for where it's going to finish. And so he had to last second sprawl across. It doesn't look pretty because there is a lot of movement in the net, but he was incredibly acrobatic in this. He was making these kick saves like a Russian ballerina. Like it really was all over the place. He looked really good in there. And I really do think that he was the reason this game was as close as it was after that first period, because Detroit was just pummeling Toronto in that opening frame. It was 75% high danger for Detroit compared to 25% at even strength in that opening period. It evened things up as it went along, but Detroit just they just saw a team that was coming off a back-to-back. Let's try to put this away early. And Samsonov played his best hockey in that first and especially into the second. So acrobatic is definitely the one word to describe how Ilya Samsonov was. And you're right, the save percentage isn't going to look good. And if he has another bad game, they're going to look at that from a cumulative basis, perhaps. But he was just sharp. Like he looked like he was a no doubter in net when it came to a lot of these 2-on-1, these high difficulty chances that Detroit had, which was the real measure of just how good Ilya Samsonov had to be to keep this within striking distance.
And it's really interesting to watch the contrasting styles with both him and Matt Murray, because Matt Murray is your, at least nowadays, your traditional bigger goalie positional type of goalie who, we saw it against Nashville, still has the ability to make some pretty athletic and acrobatic type of saves. But, Samsonov really is that guy that when he's going well, he's tracking the puck, of course, but has that ability to, get across post to post really strong and really quick and be able to make those saves that we saw tonight. So the goalies seem to be back on track, and that is a good sign for sure. But as Mark Giordano mentioned, a lot of slot opportunities for Detroit tonight. And that has been something that's been creeping back in. I know the Leafs have been, winning, of course, and maybe, it was unrealistic to expect them to continue to be such a defensively strong team this year, Dave. But of late, for whatever reason, things have started to creep back a little bit where this team is giving up quite a few grade A high danger chances on a night-to-night basis. Are you starting to see that becoming an issue, or do you think it's just a sort of a small sample size that we've been looking at this now for a couple of weeks, maybe dating back to the holiday break?
I think you're going to see a little bit of leeway there. I'm not surprised that this is starting to kind of regress a little bit. Like we talked about it, how now the motivation to kind of keep at it when you get to the second half of the season, the druthers of the season, now January, before the little February break that will come up and help refresh things. But between now and then, when you can't really move up that much and you can't move down that much, it's really hard to kind of just, go with the same kind of vigor and be as dominant as you've been on a night in, night out basis against some pretty tough teams. Like Detroit plays Toronto pretty well on a regular basis, even though Toronto has had their number lately. This is a team that's full of talent and really took it to the Maple Leafs. And even in the other games, like especially the 1-2 games ago, I thought Detroit had some pretty good moments in that game. So it's going to be tough. They've got Boston coming up. That should be a motivator to kind of see where they are in terms of if they can actually clean things up. They know that type of opponent is a real measuring stick. Boston, before losing to the Kraken today, I don't know if it's still the case after that, but was on pace to have the best points percentage of any team in NHL history if they can kind of keep it going. So that mark is out there for the Leafs to try and look good and clean up their issues. But, I think a lot of this is just the fact that they had to sprinkle in some guys. Sheldon Keefe kind of felt that his team was maybe, a little bit kind of going through one with the games in such a short period of time, which a lot of teams have had to do. You saw Pontus Holmberg even get a look up the middle with the top guys because they had Alex Kerfoot in the middle there for a little bit and took William Nylander away from center for a little bit. So there isn't optimal looks there. And so that plus Jordy Ben, who also had a difficult time. He had some good stick blocks, but at the same time that he looked exposed at times too. And I think that played a lot into it. And look, he's playing with Morgan Riley, and that's going to be tough when you're coming in. You haven't played in a long time. You're playing with Morgan Riley, and then you're expecting them to be sharp. It's tough. It's a tough ask. They just don't. The Leafs don't have, guys who can, when you just come in, they know what their role is. It just is kind of rotating, which could be a strength. But I think in these particular moments when you haven't had guys play in a while and you're just kind of shuffling it up and mixing it in, it can show a little bit of weakness too.
Yeah, and I know against Nashville, William Nylander, we talked about it on that post-game show, was arguably the best player on the ice. And in this one, had some flashes, had some moments, but really wasn't as effective as he was the previous night. And maybe it was the fifth game in 8 nights catching up to him, the second half of a back-to-back, of course. But, it just goes to show how important Auston Matthews is to this team, and that's the captain obvious part of it. But I think, we've seen it now for these 2 games without him. As good as John Tavares, Mitch Marner, and William Nylander are, it's clear that this team needs, another guy that can be a game changer when it comes to putting the puck in the net, someone that can, finish. Like Michael Bunting can score the occasional goal down low, but he's not a type of guy that's going to be able to put it in the net from distance, often. Same with a guy like Alex Kerfoot. That line in particular, funny that the night before they had a lot of jump when Kerfoot was put on that line, and tonight they were really, really bad when they were put together. So, which is why Pontus Holmberg got the bump up there with Bunting and Nylander. But just kind of evidence again that if you're the Maple Leafs right now, it'd be nice to add another guy in that top 6 that can put the puck in the back of the net. And also funny how the night before, Tanner Jeannot gets stonewalled by Matt Murray on an incredible save early in that game that maybe changes the complexion. Felt like that again tonight, where we thought Bobby McMann scored his first NHL goal, was trying to kick the puck up to his stick, missed it, went off the defenseman's skate and into the back of the net. Originally was called a goal. They called it back and said, it's the kicking motion rule, very similar to the Eric Holla one, I believe, that we saw earlier this year against New Jersey. Exactly. So I know a lot of people were saying, how can that not count? I mean, he's kicking it away from the net, but I was reminded, yes, same thing happened with Eric Holla. So if you're going to call that one, you got to call this one. The interesting part, though, I believe, is if it went off the defenseman's stick and he put it in, that's a goal. But it's because it went off his skate that they called it no goal.
Yeah, that is weird, I guess, because if it's a stick thing, it's a possession, where if it's a skate, it isn't. Well, even though it's not really a possession, I guess it depends where. It needs reinterpretation. Like that to me doesn't make sense. If you're going to go all the way with that rule, make it any part of the other player. Like you can kick it off the player and it goes in, it's fine. Why it matters between the stick and the skate, I don't know. At that part. We know the purpose of the rule. The purpose of the rule has always been for safety for all the players in the blue paint, so that people aren't just like free flowing, kicking their skates and potentially cutting someone because they're just trying to bat the puck in with their foot and just trying to go for it and put it in by any means necessary. So the spirit of the rule for why it's there makes sense, but it needs some adjustments, just like in other sports when they adjusted the surviving the catch rule, or it needed some other things there. Like maybe the direction should matter. Like if the puck is not going toward the net and you can clearly see it's kind of trying to go to his stick to try and help put it in, maybe it should count. Or if it goes off any part of the other guy's body, then it should count. Or if it's going to go off any Detroit body, it shouldn't count, but like make it consistent with any part of his body. The stick shouldn't matter. So it's a weird one. It seemed like Bobby McMann, as you'll hear, also kind of realized it. But, a lot of people, especially like Michael Bunting, when he was interviewed during the television timeout or the intermission, I should say, a lot of times we've found that a lot of the players, when they play, they don't know these rules after the fact because they just play, right? Like whatever happens afterwards is out of their control. Like when Auston Matthews had a 4-minute penalty issued for the other team, and he got cut, and it was a minor cut that they were able to patch up. But because he was the injured party, he couldn't take the first shift for that power play setup. So they had to do the face-off and then wait for that first opportunity for him to come on. And you understood why, but he didn't know. So some people do know, some people don't. And when I saw the kick there, I immediately went to Eric Holla and thought to myself, this is probably not going to count.
All right, well, let's hear from Bobby McMann, who, despite not getting that first NHL goal, says he understands the call.
Yeah, I had an idea of it, just watching the NHL. It's never happened to me personally, but didn't really see the replay, honestly. Just kind of was hoping that they were going to call it in our favor there. I trust they make the right call, and they have the review and the tools to do it, so I'm sure they made the right call.
It's tough, though, Bobby, to see that happen like that. And obviously it is. What's going through your mind when it does get rigged out?
Yeah, it sucks, but your adrenaline's pumping. You think you got it, and then they call it back, and never want to see that, but I want to get one the right way, and hopefully my first one will be a little nicer too.
Yeah, that's the spirit. I think of kind of like baseball where, you see a lot of rookies come up and, maybe their first major league hit is like a little dribbler infield hit and they reach first base. And it's like, no one will ever remember that. They'll say it's a line drive in the box score. But if you have a goal that's kind of greasy like that, maybe it's not one to, tell your grandkids about. But scoring in the NHL is a pretty cool moment. Unfortunately for Bobby McMann, he'll have to wait another game. But geez, that game might be coming again on Saturday, Dave, even if Auston Matthews is ready to go. Now been 2 games where Bobby McMann, he has definitely impressed. I mean, tonight, in all situations, was over 70% as far as the shot share goes. He's got the speed. He plays with a little bit of physicality, can get to the net. I mean, I know it's not a huge sample size, and we've done this numerous times with many a player where you see a couple games and you think maybe this guy can be a regular, and kind of fizzles out, and teams start to figure that player out. But at least for the time being, it does seem like this guy has an element that is sorely needed in that bottom 6.
Yeah, I mean, they're looking for scoring ability in that third line, and it hasn't been consistent all year. So, they tried moving Kerfoot up into that second line, which is normally a first line, with Auston Matthews back up to the middle, and move McMann over to the left side. And he fit in perfectly with Kampf, who he played with, in Engvall. Like it certainly kind of fit. And being a big guy with speed is a huge thing. It's kind of hard to kind of have both. And then you just need the hands to finish, and you have to have the instincts and hockey IQ, as they call it, which is really just positioning and knowing what to do when you don't have the puck. When you have all those things together, that's how you become a bona fide everyday NHLer. And he's starting to exhibit a little bit of that. Sheldon Keefe said after the game, he kind of cautioned. He's like, look, I mean, like, it's good. We like what we have in him, but cautioning just like you did, Rob, where we'll see where things kind of go. Like, there are a lot of guys who kind of get called up, get an opportunity. He certainly has done everything that they want him to do. The quote actually was, he's checking all the boxes, which is important, right? That's exactly what you want to be doing, but you got to be doing that on a consistent basis. So it looks like he might get another opportunity here, even if Auston Matthews does come back, because it really shouldn't affect what they do on the third line if he is the guy. Or even if they have to move him to the fourth line, that shouldn't make much of a difference either. So it's good. I just feel for Cecil McMann, who's in attendance. It is the dad's trip. We actually did get to talk to him in the first intermission for a piece that's coming out for SI, because, Cecil McMahon's was kind of an interesting story. Both Bobby's parents come in and fly in for the game, and then it's not till he lands that his son's able to tell him, oh, by the way, you're coming on this dad's trip with us too. And he was just completely floored. He only brought clothes for like one day. He was joking with us that he has to he might have to change his underwear in the hotel because he didn't bring up enough clothes. But he was just over the moon about it. And then, the first thing we asked him, because it was the first intermission, he's like, "How did you feel?" And completely selfish, being like, "Well, I was just upset for the Leafs that it didn't count for them." Like, which is, you don't expect to hear that from the hockey dad because the dad's so proud of his son, and that's usually the hockey cliche you expect to hear from the player himself. But it was quite a moment there. Like you couldn't have written it any better if that goal would have counted, but unfortunately it wasn't one of those for him. But certainly to come to Detroit, make that long trip, a lot of dads and mentors and brothers on this trip for different guys that will continue into Boston. And so unfortunate for Cecil McMann that what was a pretty cool moment in that moment in time kind of got taken away. The other thing I wanted to know, and I never asked, was how they clean up, like someone picks up the puck and throws it to the equipment manager when they get the goal. That review is so late. I want to, do they just chuck it back on the ice like a refused home run at a baseball game? Like, I always wonder, what do you do with it now? You just got to toss it? Do you give it back to the referee so it could be back in the rotation? Like, I'm kind of curious what happens there, because that's kind of one of the fun untold stories of when a milestone goal becomes a milestone goal no more.
Yeah, that's a tough one there for sure. But as we heard from Bobby McMann, he's not too hurt about it. He would rather have a much prettier goal. And if he continues to play the way that he does, it feels like it's only a matter of time. So Auston Matthews did not play in this one again. He's obviously dealing with an injury, the nagging injury that kept him out of Nashville. But as we'll hear from head coach Sheldon Keefe, that wasn't the only thing that was bugging Auston Matthews today.
I'm not quite sure. He woke up sick today too, which complicated things. So we're not quite even sure where exactly he's at, and I haven't seen or spoken to him today. So we're not quite sure. We're going to be off tomorrow as a team, and then we'll see where we're at on Saturday.
So as it stands right now, that is the status of Auston Matthews. We have no idea. Sheldon Keefe unable to give an update. So there's going to be a day off tomorrow, obviously, before the Maple Leafs take on the Bruins on Saturday. But it's just so hard to speculate because, as we mentioned, in the post-game show after Nashville, Dave, he was on the ice for the optional skate, and everybody thought he was going to play, and he didn't play.
I mean, I wasn't sure because when he comes on, you don't know, right? Like at that point, like if he's healthy but not playing, where they need to get his conditioning stuff up, that's what they've done. They've done that in the past. They did that last season when John Tavares wasn't going to play. It was like a will he or won't he? So he took the optional, and then it's okay if he comes off pretty early. That's I'm just getting my feet wet because I didn't practice and I'm good to go. But if he stays with the other scratches as other guys start coming off, then they're toast. And then the big flag was when Bobby McMann came off and Auston Matthews was still there. That's when you knew there's no way Auston Matthews is playing in this game.
Yeah, so don't ask us on Twitter. Don't ask Dave on Twitter what's happening with Auston Matthews.
Ask me whatever. I may reply, I may not.
We don't know. But nobody knows what's going on with Auston Matthews. You'll just have to wait until Saturday against the Boston Bruins, as the Maple Leafs definitely need him in that game if he can go, as they are in search of 2 points against their divisional rivals. All right, coming up on a Rink-Wide Toronto, we'll get into the officiating. God, we got to talk about it again. It was just not great in this game. It was not very good around the league, in case you're wondering. You'll have to check out Rink-Wide Vancouver maybe for that one, but I feel like we'll touch on it a little bit here as well on Rink-Wide Toronto, and more on the dad's trip and some of the lineup changes that were made heading into this game. Dave and I will give our thoughts on that. But the Maple Leafs fall to the Red Wings 4-1. You're listening to Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, free casino games and sports odds. It is time to play at bodog.net. It's Rink-Wide Toronto, pregame, postgame, every game.
Is your online business ready for the cookie-less future and set to properly capture your customers' valuable first-party data? Hey, it's Ray Ferraro. Right now, my friends at North Beach, along with their partners at Craft Growth, are offering small business owners and entrepreneurs a free website digital audit. So you can find out just exactly how ready your website is for the cookie-less future. Your online presence has never been more important. So visit craftgrowth.net and get your free digital audit. That's craftgrowth.net.
It is Rink-Wide Toronto, sponsored by Bodog, the place to play free casino games and get the latest sports odds. Rob Wong, David Alter with you. David joining us from Detroit at Little Caesars Arena, where the Maple Leafs lost 4-1 to the Detroit Red Wings. Coming up, we'll talk about the officiating once again. We'll also get into media meal musings. We teased it after the postgame show against Nashville, so we got to find out what Dave was dining on prior to the game, maybe in the middle of the game, maybe after the game. I'm sure there was a lot of food to munch on in this one as the Maple Leafs drop it 4-1. But time for the Bodog line of the day, and the Leafs were favored heading into this one by the odds makers, Dave. They, of course, 5-0-1 heading into this game on the second half of back-to-backs this year, so it hasn't been much of an issue. But they did look tired, surprising because while it was a back-to-back, I know it wasn't a lot of travel. And they had their last game before Nashville on Sunday against Philadelphia. But, like you said, maybe it was because it was, 5 in 8 days. That's always a tough stretch. But, I'm kind of stealing this from the TV broadcast. So if anybody asks, I'm kind of, taking it from them because I thought they brought up a good point. But, with all the, I guess, technological advancements and advancements with medicine and training and, all the stuff that players do nowadays, is there still, something about back-to-backs that, might be a little bit, I don't know if I want to call it like overrated, but maybe we put too much stock into back-to-backs because, guys are flying in first class and staying in, big time hotels. It's not as if, they're riding buses like in the AHL or, sitting in really cramped, economy class seats
Right.
on planes. Like they are absolutely pampered in order to, get ready for these games. Clearly, it still has an effect. I mean, we see it all the time. Back-to-backs are tough in both the NHL and the NBA. But do you think it's still maybe as big of a factor as it is nowadays than maybe it used to be?
Yeah, I think it depends on a lot of things. Like, there's a lot of them, like, especially with how condensed the schedule can get. There's a lot of them. In basketball, there's more. That's a more condensed schedule, but it's not as physical a game. If you have if you get tenderized in a game and then you have to travel afterwards and you're doing all that compressed air, like flying immediately after, then going to play a game the next day, that can take its toll on you. If it's back to back and both of those games are at home, I don't think it makes as much of a difference. Yeah, there's all these things to treat, but then you're going into a different bed. That can feel different. It's a disruption when you're traveling in general, as I can completely attest to, in terms of the planning and the preparation and stuff you've got to do that way. Even if you feel you have it down pat, it can still be kind of stressful. So you take all those things into account. I think it just makes it's a tougher one when they seem to be the road games of the second one after being at home or being somewhere else. And the Leafs have had a lot of that. Last week they had the back-to-back where they were at home on Saturday, but then in Philly on Sunday. And that's just, it's tough. It seems like they had that, and then they have the every other game. They had the 2 days off, but then again, they're faced with a back-to-back. And then, at least that's going to stop for a little bit. They're going to go to like alternating games for a little bit here. So that's good. I still think it has a factor when you're traveling after that. And it's a physical game where you get a certain hit or something, and then it starts to swell. It's a great example of it. Ben Lovejoy. Remember the HBO
that's
special?
Infamous, yeah.
Yeah. So he had this hit, and then whatever, and then he was on the plane, for those who are listening and don't know what I'm talking about. And like it was like a bump in the head that he took. And
I think
then
he
as he
took
got
like
on
a
the
puck
plane,
in the face.
Yeah.
I think it was a
and
puck in the face.
And
yeah.
normally it would be whatever it was. It would swell, but it wouldn't swell to the point where it looked like a goiter on his head when he was on the plane because of the pressurized air and everything like that. So I still think there's things you can't avoid there. And just given the physical nature of the game, when you're traveling the next day after taking a shot or something like that, that could have a real effect.
Yeah, and as Daniel Stern said, as Brickman Rookie of the Year, the key to being a big league pitcher, and maybe it equates to hockey as well, is the 3 R's: readiness, recuperation, and conditioning. So maybe that's what the Maple Leafs need to
Conditioning is the
have.
third R.
That is the third R. That's the joke, Dave. That's the joke. Rookie of the Year. It's a kids movie for a reason, right? Like, it's supposed to be a lot of dad jokes, but that's
stick an R in there somewhere. Condition.
That's what I always think about. That's what I always think about when big league teams are getting ready for these long road trips and these long seasons. But yeah, definitely a case tonight where the Leafs look like they had some tired legs, and we'll see how they fare on Boston, because there was a lot of games packed in here over the last 10 days for the Toronto Maple Leafs. All right, it is time for everybody's favorite segment, not media meal musings. That we'll save that for later, but it's time to complain about the officiating again.
Oh yeah,
and boy, there were a lot of moments here. I don't want to sound like this is any kind of Homer type post-game show or a podcast, but as we said after the Nashville game, it's not that we want to see every call made. There's infractions all the time. It's just the super obvious ones that continue to get missed. And there was a high stick on Michael Bunting that he was not very happy about from Ben Sherrod. Then later, a Detroit player with about 3 minutes to go clearly makes a play on the puck with a broken stick. Like, it does not have a blade, and they do not call that. You can see the clip. It's kind of circulating online on Twitter, where you can clearly hear someone on the Maple Leafs bench very upset about that play. And then, I referenced it earlier, and again, you can find that highlight out there. But in the Vancouver-Tampa Bay game, the Lightning are up a goal on the penalty kill with less than a minute to go, and there's a scrum after a whistle, and Mikhail Sergachev clearly punches Connor Garland in the face with a glove on in front of the officials, and they don't call it because, they're probably managing the game. They don't want to, give Vancouver a chance here. They just let it go because, it's a post-scrum whistle, and guys tend to do whatever they do in there, and they just want the players to decide it. But it just seems to keep building up here, Dave, where every single night there's just obvious calls that continue to get missed every single game.
Yeah, at some point, I don't know if you do it during the break in the schedule when half the schedule or half the teams will be off, and then you could talk to some officials, and then the other half of the teams are off, that you can kind of meet up as a group and just kind of have a refresher here, because it's getting pretty bad. And the standard is getting to the point where, are they just being taught to let things go no matter what later in the game if it's within reach? And we're just not seeing it late in the game on the third, and game management is kind of the topic du jour. That stick thing, I'm just seeing it now. I mean, it's one of those ones where those are automatic ones. No matter what the situation is, they call it every time. Similar to if the puck goes over the glass, right? Like, there's things where no matter what the situation is, if it's not left up to subjectivity, it is called every time. And if you don't have that, that's a real red flag to where your officiating's at right now. One of my favorite moments, there was Michael Bunting a couple of times. Hronek wraps him up on a scoring opportunity that doesn't get called. A bunch of things. Then later, Bunting also takes a stick to the face as he's kind of falling down, and they don't call that, where you can see him turn his head to the officials and has, some choice words, which I'm not an expert mouth reader, but it didn't look very pleasant. And so, I don't know if it's reputation at that point when you're looking at the player. Clearly, the Vancouver thing, I don't think had anything to do with that. But what tells me that there was a real problem with the officiating is Mark Giordano goes to give an earful to Wallman in this game after Wallman decks Pontus Holmberg. And finally, after a stretch of 4 different things that could have been called, they call that one. Giordano goes in just to give him, just to talk to, just to yell at him, no physical activity. And the official grabs Giordano to try and separate him away. And Giordano, I guess, because he's just kind of fed up and, Mark Giordano's got a great reputation, just kind of pushes himself off the official like he's just having none of it with the officiating, because he was just that nonplussed about what was going on. And so when you see veteran guys like that kind of react that way toward the officials, and that have the respect around the league, that's a problem. That's a real problem. And to me, I think that if you're wanting to point evidence to things have really gone downhill, you look at the people who are the most respected in the game and how they're treating the officials now because of how the officials are dealing with stuff. And you know that the standard has just gone way the heck downhill. And that to me summed up how bad things are kind of getting.
Yeah, and I guess, at this point, I just don't know what you do because, clearly the league has asked their officials to call the game a certain way, and unless that changes, it's going to really continue this way. I mean, there's just no
officials can
accountability.
They could just say, listen,
yeah, but
maybe they're doing it internally, but I think this year, other leagues do a better job of this. They could just openly admit, look, we have a high turnover. We're working on it. Just communicate, even if you communicate it, even if you have to put out a public statement saying, listen, we have a lot of turnover. We're trying to establish some things here. We're asking for your patience for this to help make the game better. All people want is communication to kind of understand about what's going on. And if they have that, then people are understanding. And then you don't have this, maybe you don't, it's not completely gone, but you don't have the same kind of discourse that you see on Twitter and things about situations that people don't understand. All they're kind of left to do is just kind of make conclusions in their own head because officials aren't held accountable for things and they don't communicate or explain things except for stuff that happens in the situation room that gets reviewed. So other leagues have done a better job with it, and the NHL needs to kind of figure this stuff out because it's silly what's going on right now.
And it's kind of interesting because I think of the NBA in the last 2-minute report, which when it first came out was sort of like, wow, like they're actually going to tell on the referees and say what they missed and what they need to, get better at. And, I just can't imagine the NHL ever doing that to their own refs. Like that's, a situation where I don't know if they'd want that type of, culpability and say, wow, this guy, did not do a very good job of making these calls and make it public. Clearly, the NHL, they have their own discussions in-house about the officiating. And, we talked about it before. As we progress towards the playoffs, the more senior officials or the ones that have had a good season tend to get the bigger games as we get closer to the Stanley Cup final. But yeah, it'd be a situation where, it'd be great if there was some accountability or at least, some sort of a third party that could give you a sense of why these calls weren't made, if, these missed calls were legitimate. But I'm not sure if we'll ever get to that point. Got a little bit more time here before we get to the media meal musings. Wanted to get your thoughts on the lineup changes that the Maple Leafs made in this one as Wayne Simmons and Jordy Ben came in. Connor Timmins, who's been really strong, of course, finally got back in with the injury to TJ Brody, sitting out in this one. Dryden Hunt as well. Is this just a case where you've got two guys, you're trying to keep them in the rotation, you're trying to give them opportunities to at least get some game action, or was there, a matchup situation here that you think that Shelton Keefe was hoping to exploit?
This was strictly just trying to keep guys fresh after playing 5 games in 8 days. Like, I don't think Connor Timmins was necessarily so bad in that last game. He had a couple of moments, but I don't think it was anything where it was discipline or anything like that, where he isn't the next guy right back up to go into the lineup. He'll be back against the Boston Bruins. They're going to need him. I think there was that. And Wayne Simmons I thought he played all right against the Philadelphia Flyers. So it was just a matter of get these guys in, keep them fresh, keep them going. You're going to need everybody down the stretch. And if you let guys kind of die on the vine for too long, then you really start to get some sort of discourse there, like, look, Frank Corrado and the Mike Babcock, excellent example of that, right? When you were the 8th defenseman or you're kind of carrying around there and you're in the lineup and you're not playing, and it was clear that there was never ever going to be a chance for you to come back in. Well, that's not good for morale, and Sheldon Keefe came in and kind of changed that. And every so often, he's going to look for opportunities that guys who aren't everyday players to kind of come back in and just kind of help guys who need a bit of a breather. And he also pointed to the fact that those are two guys that are full of personality, and with the travel and feeling a little bit run down. He felt that those two guys can help perk up the bench and get things going and step up and make a move when they needed a move. And it didn't work out for them, but that's pretty much the reason there.
All right, so we'll see what happens on Saturday against the Boston Bruins. But let's wrap this baby up. Time for Media Meal Musings. You told me we have our own music now, which is incredible for this segment. It only took
honored.
us a couple of months, but props to producer Aaron for putting this together. I sound like I'm in some sort of a stage play, and I need to sing a big number here to wrap things up. But we'll hand it off to you, Dave. What did you eat today in Detroit? Because as we all know here on Rinkwide Toronto, it is your favorite media meal in the National Hockey League.
So let me first off by saying I deliberately didn't eat lunch today because I knew that I was going to overindulge for dinner and have more than enough calories that any one person should ever have in their life. And so, as I've shown in a TikTok before, the Detroit Red Wings media meal is in the S tier of tiers when it comes to media meals across the NHL. It's reasonably priced, which is one thing, but the quality is second to none, and there's a lot of variety. So my first plate, which was course number 1, had macaroni salad with these beef cuts that are similar to what you would see at Scotiabank Arena. You know, the ones where they carve it in those slices and hand it to you. I don't know how to properly describe it. But those little slices of beef that you dip with horseradish, like the au jus beef.
Okay.
Like that kind of stuff.
Sure, yeah.
So I had that along with these well battered fries. You know I'm talking about when the fries are like so bread battered, like they're just fantastic. And a chicken finger that was incredibly, it almost tasted like it was breaded with cornflakes. It was just superb. So
wow,
that was round number 1. Then I went for a little bit more of that. I had some French onion soup along with oyster crackers, a bun, a Little Caesars pizza that was wrapped in cheese on the edge. Like, you know how they have the bacon wrapped pizza slices? This one was cheese wrapped. So, you know, the coagulated cheese, when it gets really burnt, that was the border of the pizza, which was fantastic. So I had a little bit more of that. And then I didn't go too crazy with dessert. I had a coffee and a vanilla ice cream that had sprinkles on it, along with raspberry sauce. You know how there's strawberry sauce? This was a raspberry sauce, and I love a red sauce on ice cream. In fact, I'm really mad that McDonald's took the strawberry sundae off the menu like 8 years ago. Like, you could get
awful decision.
I was so mad. Burger King still has it. They know what's up in that regard, but they're just not as plentiful. But raspberry was the choice that I made for that, and I was incredibly happy with it. And then my TikTok for later on, because everyone already knows what the media meal was like, is I took a look at the candy spread, which had 4 or 5 different varieties of chips / Doritos available, along with your choice of either M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, or Skittles, and your regular soft drinks and coffee. That was pretty good. So it's the Detroit Red Wings. It's a great new building. Everything's about it. Was great about it. If you haven't checked it out and you can get to a game here for a Leafs Red Wings game, I highly recommend. It's a great building, lots of history here. But yeah, the media meal is just, it's a joy. It really is a joy. And I just wish every other team around the NHL took a tour and looked and just lived up to be the Stanley Cup champions of media meals like the Detroit Red Wings are.
I've said it before. You have to create your own Michelin guide for NHL arenas for the media, the traveling media, so that they know where they should. But that's fine.
There's niche enough upon niche.
I guess, but there's a lot of media that covers NHL teams, right? So there's
NBA media. It's the same one for the Pistons.
You go. So you've got 2 leagues covered.
Yeah.
There's turnover every year. New reporters are coming in, and people can purchase your ebook at a very hefty price of like $99.99. If you need like 5 installments to purchase it, by all means. I need to get a cut of this because I'm the one that. suggested it. Yeah, a subscription service, right?
Sure.
And then people will forget about their subscription. They'll forget to
subscribe
cancel.
to David Alter Plus.
You'll keep raking it in, on David Alter Plus. So it's there we go. We got the business model all worked out. But as per usual, Detroit delivers once again with the media meal.
It's a shame it's the last
David
visit
Alter.
of the year.
That is too bad, but maybe you can start covering some Detroit Pistons games before the season comes to an end.
You never know.
Dying once again, but Boston coming up on Saturday. That is the next Rink-Wide Toronto post-game show. We'll see what the media meal is like at, what is it? TD Garden? What is it?
TD Garden.
Jeez.
You can call
TD
it the Garden again.
So.
It used to be called the Fleet Center when it first opened, and then TD bought Fleet Bank. And everyone was really happy because they went from Boston Garden to this new building called Fleet Center. And then when they renamed it TD Garden, they had a sign outside as the name was being changed because they hadn't changed the marquee signs yet because it was the off season. And it said, you can call it the Garden again.
Hey, it's Darren Dreger and Ray Ferraro from the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. And Ray, we're into the second half of the NHL season, and the trade deadline is obviously getting closer.
Every night, wins and losses are starting to mean more as teams try to stay in the mix in the standings to secure that playoff spot. And man, some teams could use some help before the deadline.
Yeah, we've got the storylines, trade rumblings all covered, along with the top hockey guests twice weekly, right here on the Ray and Dregs Hockey Podcast. Check us out everywhere you get podcasts.